In the majestic kingdom, mountain peaks are always shrouded in clouds, and the golden sunrise gently touches the lush green valley. At the foot of the mountain, Elara strolled leisurely, her deep blue eyes gazing curiously at the hazy mountain range. While the villagers hurried back and forth, Elara chose a peaceful corner by the fountain, immersing herself in the pages of a book. On the horizon, the stone castle loomed majestic but cold, where Alaric stood alone on its balcony amidst the mist. The castle walls seemed to groan beneath the permafrost, shimmering strangely as if carrying the breath of a curse. The rock rose clings tightly to the cold wall, its frozen petals symbolizing the waning passage of time. In the square, Elara remained seated, her hands gently turning the pages of a thick book, unconcerned by the surrounding hustle and bustle. The light from the pages of the book reflected in Elara's eyes, igniting a passion for lands she knew only through words. Behind her, a few locals stopped to look at the young girl, whispering their displeasure at her difference. Elara looked up, ignoring the whispers, her gaze fixed on the misty mountaintop with a yearning for adventure. Brogan, the hunter, approached with a smug smile, a bouquet of wildflowers in his hand, completely confident in his own charm. Elara responded with a forced, polite smile, her hands clutching the book tightly to protect her private world. Brogan presented the flowers in an ostentatious manner, and Elara merely nodded in acceptance, skillfully avoiding his arrogant gaze. He leaned back on the bench, boasting about his hunting trips, but Elara remained silent, her mind refusing to listen. Not wanting to prolong the situation, Elara stood up and tried to leave. She returned the bouquet, causing Brogan's face to change color. Enraged, Brogan grabbed her wrist, but Elara forcefully pulled her hand away, shaking her head in disappointment at his action. She walked away without looking back, leaving Brogan fuming and crushing the bouquet in his hands. In his small workshop, Alaric worked diligently with mechanical equipment, blueprints, and tools scattered everywhere. Elara pushed the door open, bringing warmth, a basket of food, and a thick blanket for her father's journey. Alaric stopped what he was doing, his face beaming as he explained his quest for the crystal that would be the greatest invention of his life. Elara tenderly helped her father put on his coat, handed him his bag, and hugged him tightly. Her heart filled with anxiety about the journey ahead. From the doorway, Elara watched her father wave goodbye as his homemade vehicle began to move, emitting plumes of white smoke. The car drove deep into the dark, dense forest, where the foliage obscured the light and fog began to envelop the path. At a dimly lit crossroads, Alaric stopped, bewildered, and consulted his tattered map to navigate the wilderness. Unexpectedly, the car hit a rock and the tire burst, throwing Alaric onto the road. He staggered to his feet amidst the mist. Shivering from the cold, Alaric wandered aimlessly until a stone castle loomed before him, looming like a ghost. With trembling hands, he pushed open the frost-covered iron gate, the scraping sound of metal signaling the chill. Stepping into the courtyard, Alaric was stunned by the frozen stone statues, his breath turning into thin smoke in the silent space. A roar ripped through the silence, and from the darkness, a colossal black shadow emerged. Alaric was horrified to see Griffin. A close-up reveals Griffin's terrifying face, with fiery eyes and bared fangs, growling angrily at the trembling man. The beast stood tall, its shadow enveloping Alaric as he collapsed, overwhelmed by its immense power. The dungeon door slammed shut, trapping Alaric in darkness along with the cold, echoing sound of the bolt. In her small house, Elara sat restlessly by the window, her anxious eyes fixed on the deserted street that had been empty for days. The horse, panicked, returned alone, and Elara, realizing something was wrong, immediately rushed out of the house. She held the reins tightly to calm the animal, her face filled with shock at the damage to her father's car. Without hesitation, Elara donned her cloak, mounted her horse, and galloped away from the village to follow her father's trail deep into the forest. Traversing dark, winding paths, her journey led her to the imposing iron gates of a cold, stone castle.
I will
Elara
get
dismounted,
you out of here,
cautiously
I promise.
stepped into the courtyard, her calls for her father echoing and then fading into an eerie silence. In the dimly lit hallway, the fox Flicker, with his bright blue eyes, silently
my
observed
father's
Elara
place.
from the shadows. Hearing a faint cough, Elara ran to the dungeon and found her father huddled on the cold stone floor behind the bars. Father and daughter held hands, their hearts heavy with emotion. Elara looked into her father's eyes and promised to do everything she could to get him out of here. Griffin's enormous shadow appeared. Elara took a deep breath, straightened up, and turned to face it with unwavering determination. She looked the beast straight in the eyes, offering to replace her father despite Alaric's desperate pleas to stop her. Griffin was stunned by the young girl's courage, his eyes reflecting astonishment at her unprecedented selflessness. The beast nodded, opened the prison door, and pushed Alaric out into the corridor, forcing him to leave his daughter in agony. Elara entered the cell without hesitation, giving Griffin a determined look before the iron door slammed shut. Griffin dragged Alaric down the dark corridor, his faint cries for help fading into the cold air. Thrown out of the castle gates, Alaric painfully got to his feet, took one last desperate look back, and then ran off to find help. The old man crossed the thorny bushes, his heart heavy with worry for Elara. He knew he had to find someone to save his daughter at all costs. Inside the castle, Griffin returned to the dungeon, opened the door, and motioned for Elara to follow him out of the damp darkness. It led her to a lavish but dusty bedroom, Griffin growling, signaling that this would be her new home. Elara stepped out onto the balcony and gazed at the withered winter garden, a profound sense of loneliness overwhelming her. A little while later, as they were exploring, the fox, Flicker, suddenly appeared, tilting its head in a curious greeting to Elara. Elara gently knelt down and held out her hand. After a moment of hesitation, Flicker
Griffin,
approached
are you quite all right?
and affectionately nuzzled
I was
his head
wondering if you
against her
might like
hand. The fox scurried
never
around
mind.
Elara and then stopped, as if inviting her to follow and discover its
you
hidden
can't
secrets.
learn some
Intrigued by
manners,
its mischievous
I won't
nature,
dine with you.
Elara followed Flicker through the corridors, the light from its eyes guiding her through the darkness. The dining room door opened. Griffin sat at the head of the long table, Elara at the other end. The atmosphere was suffocatingly silent. Griffin ate clumsily, was rude, ignored all attempts at conversation, and responded only with growls. Elara stood up abruptly, declaring she wouldn't eat with them unless the child learned proper manners. Griffin roared in anger, slamming his hand down on the table, making the dishes rattle. But Elara remained unfazed. Elara resolutely left with Flicker, leaving Griffin sitting alone with a look of regret and confusion in his eyes. Flicker led Elara to two large doors. When she pushed them open, she was overwhelmed
Would you
by
like
the
me to read
magnificent
to you?
library with its thousands of books. Elara's eyes were filled with amazement as she ran inside and touched the ancient books. This
There once
was
was a
paradise.
girl named Elara.
Flicker jumped onto the
who
stack of
loved
books.
to read
Elara
stories.
picked up a fallen one and smiled gently at her
The
little
old
friend.
man had seen
From the doorway,
many battles.
Griffin quietly observed Elara's joy. It had never seen anyone so happy in
And
this
so
castle.
the brave knight,
Elara
after
recognized
many
it,
trials,
and she held up the
found
book,
true solace
asking
in
if
the
it wanted to
warmth
hear
of
it
the
read. Griffin hesitated,
Say
then
the.
agreed. By the firelight, Elara read aloud, while
The.
Griffin sat quietly in the shadows, listening intently like a child. The beast's face softened. It was captivated by the young
Read.
girl's warm and expressive voice. As time passed and those reading sessions became a bridge, Griffin gradually moved closer to the fireplace. Elara patiently taught Griffin to read, the creature clumsily tracing each line of text with its enormous claws. Griffin tried to pronounce a word, and Elara smiled encouragingly, her eyes filled with warmth for it. One morning, Elara
I
and
think
Griffin
you're
were
getting it.
strolling in the snowy garden, with Flicker running and jumping ahead, cheering
I am
on
so
their
sorry.
bond. Elara playfully tossed a
Griffin, you're
snowball
so
at Griffin.
sweet.
It was startled and then
I-
clumsily threw it back, beginning a playful game amidst the snow. Elara smiled brightly, and Griffin stopped to watch her, a rare and genuine smile appearing on its face. In the ballroom, Elara taught Griffin the basic steps, even though Griffin was clumsy and often stepped on her feet. They both laughed at each other's awkwardness, marking a genuine spiritual connection between the two beings. Flicker ran around their feet, wagging its tail excitedly, as if joining in a happy dance. A close-up of the rock rose, its last petal falling, signaling that time to break the curse is running out. Griffin gazed sadly at the flower, then turned to look at Elara, his heart heavy with worry and regret. At the inn, Alaric desperately tried to convince everyone about the beast, but the villagers only responded with mocking laughter. Brogan sat silently in the dark corner, listening intently to every word with a calculating look in his eyes, a dark idea beginning to take shape. He stood up and mocked Alaric, calling him a mad old man, which elicited another round of scornful laughter from the inn. Alaric, left alone, deciding to embark on the journey to rescue his daughter by himself, without any help. Brogan watched with a sly smile, then turned to his companions and began planning their monster hunt. At the castle, Elara confided her longing for her father to Griffin, her face sorrowful and her eyes filled with unspoken feelings. Wanting to make Elara happy, Griffin led her to a secret room and gave her the precious magic mirror as a gift. Looking in the mirror, Elara saw her father, haggard and lost in the deep forest. Her heart ached with fear. She wept and begged Griffin to let her go home to save her father.
Welcome.
Seeing her suffering, Griffin's heart ached.
You can use
After
it
some
to
struggle,
remember me.
Griffin nodded in agreement, saying she was free and could leave immediately to save her father. Elara, overcome with emotion, hugged Griffin tightly to express her gratitude, an action that surprised the
Alaric,
beast,
you're
who
burning
awkwardly
up.
tried to comfort her. Griffin gave Elara the magic mirror as a keepsake, and the fox Flicker sadly rubbed his head against her leg as they said goodbye. Standing on the balcony, Griffin watched Elara disappear into the distance, then tilted his head back and let out a pained and lonely growl. Elara found Alaric delirious in the forest.
That beast
She
is a
quickly helped her
menace.
father get up and brought him back
Griffin
to the
is
village.
kind, Brogan.
At home,
He would never
Elara
hurt
lovingly
anyone.
cared for her father, tucking him in with warm blankets and preparing his medicine, hoping for his speedy recovery.
Yes.
Knowing Elara had returned,
Hey, give that
Brogan
back.
approached her with feigned concern to
Give that
inquire about the beast. Elara stood opposite Brogan, resolutely defending
must
Griffin
kill
and asserting
the
that
beast.
it was a compassionate creature. To prove her point, Elara shows Brogan an image of
Please,
Griffin in a
listen to
mirror,
us. We must
but he
stop
only
this
sees it as an
madness.
opportunity to play the hero. Brogan violently snatched the magic mirror and rushed out into the
You
square,
won't get away with
ignoring
this.
all of
Let us
Elara's
out,
attempts
Brogan.
to stop him. He held up the mirror, inciting fear among the villagers, declaring that the
There has to
monster
be a
had to be
way.
destroyed to protect peace. Elara and Alaric rushed out to stop them, but the angry crowd drowned out their voices and pushed them aside. To stop them, Brogan locked Elara and Alaric in the wine cellar and triumphantly bolted the door shut. Elara desperately banged on the door, screaming for help, while Alaric frantically tried to unlock it and escape to save his daughter. Under a stormy sky, the armed group led by Brogan began to advance toward the stone castle. The torchlight reflected in the water as they crossed the bridge, approaching the beast's lair in the night. Inside the castle, Griffin sensed danger, and it stood tall with a determined gaze and a defiant roar. The loyal Flicker ran to Griffin's side, and objects began to shake, preparing to fight to defend the house. The crowd used tree trunks as rams to break down the gate, the iron door shaking violently under the continuous pounding. With the door broken down, Brogan
We
led
have
the
to
villagers in, but they immediately encountered resistance from Griffin and his friends. Flicker moved swiftly,
Almost
dodging
there.
the attackers' feet, causing them to fall and creating chaos. Inside the cellar, Alaric managed to unlock the door, and the father and son immediately ran out to prevent a tragedy. They galloped towards the castle at breakneck speed, hoping to rescue Griffin in time. Brogan slipped through the chaos, venturing deep into the castle in search of his ultimate target. He saw Griffin standing alone on the balcony, looking down at the battle with a broken heart, unwilling to shed blood. Brogan launched a surprise attack from behind. The beast dodged, and a fight to the death ensued on the high balcony. A breathtaking battle unfolded on the rooftops and walls under a torrential downpour, every step fraught with danger. Griffin was merely defending himself, with no intention of retaliating ruthlessly against Brogan's sword strikes. Just then, Elara ran up and called out Griffin's name, a call that ignited a fierce will to live within the beast. Upon seeing Elara, Griffin's power erupted. It roared and lunged towards Brogan to protect its lover. Griffin easily overpowered Brogan, cornering him against the balcony railing, but ultimately chose to spare his life. Griffin turned his back and climbed toward Elara, believing that forgiveness would bring about a peaceful outcome. But Brogan cowardly pulled out his knife and stabbed Griffin hard in the back, causing it to roar in excruciating pain. Griffin's reflex swing caused Brogan to lose his balance, fall from the balcony, and disappear into the fog. The beast collapsed onto the stone floor, and Elara rushed to embrace it tightly, its breath fading in her arms. She pressed her face close to it,
At least I got to see you one last
reassuringly
time.
that everything would be all right, and promising never to leave it again. The frail Griffin touched Elara's face, softly saying that at least it had seen her face one last time. A close-up of the rose, its last petal falling just as Griffin breathed his last amidst the silent stillness of the world. Elara wept uncontrollably in her grief, pressing her chest against the beast and confessing her profound love. Suddenly, a brilliant golden light emanated from Griffin, enveloping them both in magic amidst the cold winter night. Elara was shocked to see the layer of rocky fur disappear, replaced by the figure of a handsome young man. The prince landed gently on the ground,
Is that you?
opened his eyes, looked at his hands, and then smiled brightly at Elara. They drew closer. Elara looked into his eyes and realized that Griffin's gentle spirit was still there.
The frost
A
is
warm
melting.
embrace, a wave of magic
The
spreading,
gardens are coming
dispelling
back
all
to
darkness and gloom from the castle. The overall scene shows melting snow and ice, the castle walls gleaming, and the withered garden bursting with spring blossoms. Flicker the fox returned to normal. The blue light disappeared, replaced by his usual mischievous demeanor. Alaric smiled contentedly as he watched Elara and the prince happily dancing in the warm spring sunshine.